Everyone acts as though everything that's happening is the fault of Iran. Well, Iran did not begin this war, and you'll get a response, oh, but they started this war 47 years ago. Well, that's not really true. We decided that whatever they proposed, whatever they stood for, whatever they wanted was somehow or another bad. And so we bankrolled Mr. Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq, with huge amounts of money. We bankrolled him to go to war with Iran in the hopes that Iran was prostrate, it was weak, most of its senior military leadership was gone, its equipment was old, and that the Iraqis, with our brilliant advice, remember, keep that in mind, our brilliant military advice, once again, would enable the Iraqis to rapidly overrun Iran's oil fields. And the big bonus at that point was that the people living in Iran in those areas were mostly Arabs. And so we said Arab nationalism will triumph and Arab nationalism will bring down Iran. Does that sound familiar? Ultimately, it didn't work. In fact, the Arabs in Khuzestan, who mostly are Shiites, not all, but mostly, all decided that their citizenship and their presence inside Iran was much more important to them than signing away their lives to Saddam Hussein. The whole thing failed. We think somewhere between 500 and 800,000 casualties on the Iranian side. How many died? Certainly somewhere between 300,000 and 500,000 Iranians died. They fought tenaciously, and ultimately the war ended with Iran in control of its own oil resources, which was what was most important. And they hurled rockets and missiles at each other. None of us really paid a great deal of attention to it. We only looked at what Saddam did. But again, the Iranians learned a lot from that. So here we sit right now. We keep arguing that somehow or another Iran makes us uncomfortable, presents this tremendous threat, and that if we don't destroy Iran and bring it under control, that millions of terrorists will overrun the world and so forth. It's all nonsense. Who wants this? This is an Israeli proposition. This is an Israeli agenda. And the Israeli agenda is underwritten by billionaires in the United States who bought President Trump the White House. Least they can do after they bought Congress for their own purposes, might as well buy the White House as well. They own everything. So they own everything right now. And what do you get? You get Marco Rubio. You get Pete Hegseth. You get Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and everybody else that is loyal to the bitter end to the Israeli agenda. And anybody who thinks otherwise is wrong. If you were not an Israel first person, you weren't going to get a job in the administration. Yeah. It's unapologetic. So we're stuck because we took on a war without really understanding what we were doing. You know, one of the first things you need to do is say, well, wait a minute, we're going to go into Iran, right? And somebody says, well, we want to bomb it. Okay. What do you want to bomb? Well, we're going to bomb their nuclear facilities. We're going to bomb this. And then pretty soon the target list goes from 10 critical things out to 1,000. And, oh, well, those targets are destroyed. What do we do now? Well, we'll find more targets. That's kind of where we are. And then somebody brings up, well, what about ground forces? Ooh, ground forces. That could mean a lot of casualties, and Americans don't like that. And, oh, by the way, we don't have enough of an army to do anything. And this thing sort of, snowballs and continues. Now we found it impossible to break through the strait. We find it impossible to seize control of the strait. We're afraid that if we do, we'll lose ships. So now we have a quote unquote blockade. Well, here's a flash of the obvious that maybe everybody needs to understand, including Mr. Rubio. Tankers carrying oil to China, India, Japan, they are passing through the strait. Oil is reaching those countries. Iran is exporting oil, not just through the strait, but also overland. So the notion that somehow or another Iran is being reduced to a state of total poverty, panic, and anarchy is wrong. It's not true. So what good is the blockade? What is it doing? Is it making any difference? Well, what it means is that as long as we're playing this particular game, no ship that is destined for the United States or Israel or has an Israeli or American flag on it is going to get through the strait. That's clear. But everybody else, and by the way, when I mentioned China, Russia, India, for instance, and Japan, the Japanese, certainly on the first 3 tankers that went through, they paid no tolls. China, Russia, and Japan are paying no tolls. The only people that are being expected to pay tolls are nations that have aligned themselves in one way or another with us or with Iran's enemies. They're paying tolls, but even they are moving fuel, oil, various other substances through the Gulf to their destinations. So this, I don't know what the hell this blockade is really doing. I haven't figured it out.
They keep saying that it's crippling them economically. You hear that regularly. They're convinced of it.
I don't see any evidence for it. Everybody seems to forget you have this giant land border. You also have the Caspian Sea. All this stuff can move in and out of the country without any interference from us. The bottom line is that we are delusional. We're living in a bubble, and the bubble says we are winning. But you leave the bubble, and everybody else knows, no, you're not.
You know what's so troubling, Doug, is that that Trump is surrounded by enough people, a chosen few, that are willing to keep making the argument. So even when we just heard the state of affairs with what's going on diplomatically, or if they're talking at all, but we just heard Rubio explain what's going on there, then we've got people on the other side that's saying, listen, those talks aren't going to work anyway, so let's resort to the military action. Here's former CIA Dan Hoffman.
It's very difficult for us to carry on negotiations when we don't have that. When Iran is in control of the Strait of Hormuz, they have a lot of leverage. The regime right now is in the hands of General Vahidi and the IRGC hardliners, and they are pressing ahead with their strategic goals. Let's remember that Iran is kind of a junior partner, but part of the axis of dictatorships aligned closely with Russia and China and North Korea. Certainly for Russia and for China, Iran wants to reduce or eliminate altogether U.S. influence in the Middle East. That's part of what's behind this. I don't see a way of climbing down through negotiation absent additional military strikes. I'm sorry to say that I think we're going to have to resume military strikes. If we want to get to a point where we have the leverage to get the deal that we want, the deal that's better than JCPOA, on which the president will be judged and arguably his foreign policy legacy, I think that may be in the offing.
So, Doug, the argument that more strikes is what will give us the leverage that we finally need, that's the mentality.
Well, let's sort of examine this Zionist Jewish narrative, which he's just presented, which is a narrative that you hear across all the mainstream media in the United States and much of Western Europe. That's for obvious reasons. The people in control fall into that particular category. It's not accurate, it's misleading, but he's pointing out something that is painfully obvious, and that is we can't win a military victory over Iran right now. That's an impossibility. So what do you do if you can't win the military victory? Well, normally you negotiate and get the best deal that you can. You can't do that. That's outrageous. Your whole life, Mr. President, your whole world will be judged on the basis of what you do in the Persian Gulf. Well, I freely admit that what we do in the Persian Gulf has already had an impact. It's revealed that we are not invincible. It's demonstrated that our forces, which are very good and can do many things, are not designed to do what we've asked them to do. That's true. It also ignores the enormous impact that this is having on the world as well as us, and how negative that is, and can only get worse unless we change the current conditions. Can't change those militarily, so what do? Well, you ratchet up the attack. You have to attack more targets. You have to kill more people. And eventually you discover there's only one way forward, and that's a nuclear weapon. And people will say, well, you, Mr. President, are not a man of your word. You have no guts unless you use a nuclear weapon against these evil people. Of course, this business of who's evil and who isn't is very much open to debate right now. But I think that's the next step. And I think it's important for us to keep in mind that that's coming. And what we need to understand is that if that is even approached seriously in any way, shape, or form, the consequences around the world will be extremely profound. We already know that Pakistan possesses a nuclear weapon. Of course they do. They've had that for many, many years. And contrary to the expectations of many people, the very radicalized Islamist Pakistanis have never used it against anybody. They saw it as a necessary deterrent to prevent a war of extermination waged against them by India. Well, it's worked out so that India also has a deterrent, and that has helped, frankly, to keep the peace on the Indian subcontinent. Neither side has been willing to do that. But now we have a different set of circumstances. Israel, not us, but Israel, is embarked on a war of conquest in the Middle East. Its army is falling apart. It's got serious morale problems. They've lost a lot of people. The population doesn't want to fight, but that doesn't matter because they still have the Air Force. And most of the people that they're attacking have no air defenses. And as long as the people they're attacking have no air defenses to speak of, they can pretty much bomb at will wherever they like against anybody they don't like. Secondly, this war of conquest is very serious. All you have to do is look on the uniforms of the Israeli soldiers. And it shows Sinai under Israeli control, Jordan, parts of northern Saudi Arabia, half or more of Syria, part of northern Iraq, and most of Lebanon. So that's the goal. And right now, there is a growing consensus that this must stop. And that consensus is in the Islamic world. The Arab states are too corrupt, too greedy, and too fearful, that is, their elites, to do anything. So the task then falls to the non-Arab states. The non-Arab states that are very opposed to this are Turkey, Ankara, Pakistan, and obviously Iran and Tehran, Islamabad. These are the capitals, these are the states that are opposed. And there are discussions. People are saying it's time to turn over nuclear weapons, one way or the other in some form, even if it's temporary, to Iran and Turkey in particular. Give them this as the deterrent they need to bring this war to a halt. Now, this is very dangerous, as we all know, because Mr. Netanyahu has nuclear weapons. Everybody's aware of that, at least somewhere in the neighborhood of 300. If he thinks that this could happen, what is to stop him from launching a nuclear weapon? Quick answer, nothing.
Nothing.
What evidence is there that he listens to anything Washington says to him? That he takes instruction from the president of the United States? Nothing.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's important that we keep these things in mind. And if we were serious about bringing this to an end, this terrible and pointless and stupid and self-defeating war with Iran, we would pull the plug on the Israelis right away and say, very well, you don't care to participate in a negotiated settlement that we are reaching with Iran? So be it. You're on your own now. We are going to come to an understanding with the Iranians. I also think the Israelis, there are still sober-minded, balanced thinkers in Israel, would say, wait a minute. You mean the United States refuses to support our war of mass murder and expulsion in Gaza or Lebanon or anywhere else we care to wage it?
Right.
We might want to consider stopping. Because how long can we last in this region without unconditional support from the United States? But we are not ready to go there. But in truth, that's what needs to happen.
But it's not, Doug, because the neocons still have at least one more silver bullet. And here's Hoffman explaining that silver bullet.
There's lots of options for strikes. There are strikes against Iran's military facilities, their ballistic missile, drone facilities, the nuclear program, but there are also decapitation strikes. And I'm quite sure that in the wide range of options that the U.S. military is considering, and Israel as well, are additional decapitation strikes. In other words, if the current Iranian leadership doesn't want to negotiate, maybe the next round will.
So we can talk to the newer leadership, Doug. We've just got to get to that next level. Those are the people we're looking for. Then we can work this out. Do you believe they're hanging their hat on that?
Well, we know from experience how well this works. We know that if you remove one CEO in a corporation, they replace him with another. And if that CEO is unsatisfactory, doesn't work, you replace him with a new one. What they don't understand is that it doesn't make any difference just because you kill a certain number of people that are in positions of authority, that the whole world is going to fall apart. We're back to the false assumption that Iran is what I call another Sykes-Picot state, the Sykes-Picot states are places like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iraq, so forth, Syria, and then ultimately Israel. That if you just get the people in charge at the top, everybody else will be scared into submission. That's not going to happen in Iran. There is no willingness to see Iran as what it is. It is a core civilizational state. It is a great nation. It has existed for over 2,500 years. Some people would argue more. It has its own culture, its own history, its own way of life. It has high human capital. They have people with the brains, the ability to operate on a very high plane when it comes to rocketry, nuclear weapons, computers of any kind, cyberspace, artificial intelligence, all of those things. Stop pretending that Iran is something less. It's not. It is a major power. And it is coming back to life in ways that I don't think any of us expected when this war started. They are becoming an ever greater power with each passing day. They understand the leverage they have, and they are not going to retire into the corner and skulk in fear. It's not going to happen. We went through this with Russia. You know, Russia is weak. Russia will fall apart. Russia is corrupt. Russia is this, Russia that. Russia today is stronger than it has ever been, and certainly in my lifetime in the last 30, 40 years. So, no, this is insane. It's crazy. It has no chance of success. We've been doing this decapitation thing forever.
And Doug, you would say, I'm assuming that you'd say that Iran is in a stronger, better place than they were before this war.
Strategically, without question. And whatever damage they've sustained, they know they can recover. And we don't seem to understand that. They will bounce back. They'll probably bounce back stronger and better than they ever have in their past. Their society is much more cohesive now. I would argue it's probably more cohesive than the Israeli society at this stage.
Doug, you had sent me a analysis on gas from Paul Sankey. Let me play the clip from what he was putting out.
US gasoline inventories, they are absolutely plummeting. And so what we've seen here is the largest 13-week move in the history of the series. It is interesting to note that in the prior 13 weeks, you had a record build over that period. So again, we went into this with high inventories. But certainly what you're seeing in US gasoline is an extremely rapid drawdown. And most of us are pointing towards June to July. That is, as June continues and we begin to hit July, as getting critical for when we hit the bottom of the tanks.
I think Paul Sankey is right. He's not the only man saying this, but he's a good person to listen to. He's got a lot of experience in this industry. And he's simply saying where we're headed right now, we're going to hit rock bottom probably mid to late July, certainly early August at the latest. And that's because we're selling off portions of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And this is designed to suppress prices, particularly for gasoline, but also for jet fuel. And some of these sales are being done inside the United States for use inside the United States. And some of these sales are being done or being executed to help friends overseas. Remember, these are all the people like the Japanese, the Koreans, and others that were never consulted on the dumb idea of going to war with Iran. But we're going to run out of any sort of flexibility, and we're going to halt all exports, I suspect, quite soon of crude oil. Some exceptions, things like the shale oil that needs special refining, which we cannot provide. But otherwise, I think you're going to see an embargo self-imposed in terms of not exporting anything else. And the question is what happens to our economy, you know, and steel and oil have turned out to be, over the last several hundred years, the big indicators of national strength and prosperity and power. Those indicators are not encouraging right now, not by any means.
And then we can add to that the whole situation with fertilizer.
Oh, God. You know, it's so interesting. How do you get it across to people that, you know, fertilizer is life? This green energy, green revolution that we went through back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, really has changed the world. It's doubled the population of the planet. We've been able to feed people on a scale we never thought possible. Right. But without the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the other ingredients, we're in a lot of trouble. And, you know, what you don't plant today, you don't eat in 6 months. And it takes time for these supply chains to mobilize. Those supply chains are in trouble. Why? Well, trucks run on diesel. What are they going to do? They've got to deliver this. It's frightening. And that's why to listen to somebody like Rubio, who is pitching these sort of, empty slogans and empty promises, is so disturbing, because nobody wants to frighten people. But, people ought to be frightened right now, because what we've done by attacking Iran, we've not just hurt ourselves. We put a large portion of the world's population at very high risk.
Disrupted the whole world. We're doing fine right now as far as, supplies go, but that's not going to hold.
Well, nobody paying attention to the numbers of farmers who are declaring bankruptcy.
Bankruptcies.
They can't afford to buy fertilizer. The price is going through the roof. What good is fertilizer you can't afford to buy? And how much can you subsidize? Now, right now in India, they're subsidizing everything in sight to try and keep the lid on. But even they are worried, the government is, over the next several months, how long can this go on before everything collapses? There are other things that you need to do. We need more nuclear power. Let's be frank. That's vital and essential. Are there green aspects of power that you can reinvigorate? Yeah, sure there are. But you're going to need to do a lot more with coal. Remember, coal, that's the evil thing that everybody wants to get rid of. It's dirty and nasty and bad. Well, the Indians, and I think the Japanese, are moving in that direction. I know they are in China. They're liquefying coal. You can do that. And it works. We're going to have to do all of these things, but there has to be a sense of not just urgency, but emergency in Washington. I don't see it. No. I don't see any evidence for it, not with the president or anybody else, because the first thing anybody who's advising the president should do every morning is say, sir, end the war. Get out. Stop. We'll sort the details later. Right now, we need to get out.
He's already kicked those people out, Doug. He's not going to get face to face with any of those people that would even hint at what you just suggested.
Yeah, I think so.
Just yesterday, Doug, I know you released the national conversation called All for What, and you get into some great details about what needs to happen, what should be happening already. And I'd like to set it up before you get into what you were talking about in this video with Megyn Kelly, who was just on a podcast yesterday. And you know how close she was with the president for a year. She campaigned for him, spoke at rallies for him. I mean, she was a real, MAGA loyalist. Let's see how Megyn Kelly is depicting the MAGA movement at this present time.
All along, he's defined what is and is not MAGA. And he told me personally, MAGA will feel the way I want them to feel. I'll tell them how to feel about this, that, or the other thing. And they will. And he has been totally right on that. The problem for Trump now is that he has defined MAGA literally to those who agree with Mark Levin. If you don't agree with Mark Levin, you're not MAGA, which means you must be a neocon whose main issue is what's in the best interest of Israel. And that defines MAGA down to nothing. It's a nub. So what's that? It's not large. It's not important. It's not cool. It's not appealing to young people. It has no future. Much like Mark Levin himself, it's old, it's angry, and it's dying. So those are the people who, like, the die-hard loyalists who will just feel the way Trump wants them to feel, are the ones who are harassing you for saying what you think about Thomas Massie. They're entitled to their opinion, but they do not represent the Republican Party. They don't represent the right, and they definitely don't represent the future.
People are waking up, and some of his strongest advocates, his loyalists, have turned, and just what you heard Megyn in her own words describe. And is that not similar to what you were saying? And what is this for? What's going on in America right now?
I tried to answer and urged everybody to ask very simply, is who is governing us? That may seem like a stupid question to some, but we need to ask that question. Who is governing us? Who is ruling this country? Who is determining the answers to the big questions? It's certainly not the American people. Nothing happening right now is something the American people would have voted for. And they're beginning to discover that it doesn't make any damn difference whom you vote for, because both parties are captives of the same lobbies. Now, we talk primarily about the Israel lobby and the billionaires that support it. That's part of it. But there are other lobbies, whether they're in the agricultural sector, the high-tech sector, and other things. You've got lots of lobbies that are weighing in on big policy questions. The American people aren't represented. The American people need to come to the conclusion that if they're going to be represented effectively, if someone is going to stand up for them, articulate their interests, and then act accordingly, they're going to have to move in a new direction. And that's really what the national conversation wants to do. We want to build the foundation for a third-party movement. We want to explore how large it can be, how many people we can bring in, and how we recruit people and make it work. This is not something that can happen quickly, but I think it's going to happen faster in the future than ever before, because the pain inflicted on the American people is going to grow in the months ahead. And people in the government that wave it off and say, oh, no, it's not a problem. We can print more money. We can print for another 10 years before anything happens. Well, look at the bond market in Great Britain right now. Look at what's happening in London. That government hangs by a thread. We're on the same path. These things are not controllable. And the idea of simply printing more money as a way to solve all the problems is a dead end. So I think that's really what I tried to do in this, and get people to understand that we have been essentially taken over by a minority of very wealthy people who are calling the shots. They don't care whatever about us under any circumstances. So this has got to stop. But the only way to stop it is not to go to Washington and ask the people that created the problem to help us. They're not going to do anything for us. It's not in their interest. Look at all the insider training. People say, well, we got to give the Democrats a chance. They had a chance. They've had a chance many times. It hasn't improved anything. What is the difference between Tony Blinken and Marco Rubio? Nothing. Wake up. These people are all bought and paid for. And we're going to have to move away from them. That's because people say, can we do this? Well, somebody said, Doug, that's going to take a lot of money. I said, yes, it will. And it's going to take people with major wealth backing it, but it can be done.
It's got to be done, right?
Yeah, I think so, or we're not going to be around long. What we need to do is we need to build a new republic. The old one is on its last legs. There's nothing wrong with that. All great powers, great nations go through this. We just need to build a new republic.
Yeah, amen. I want to point everybody to MacGregorWarrior.substack.com. That's where you can get all Doug's work, all his writings. It's all laid out for you here.
Yeah, we'll have some new things on there very shortly, and I appreciate everybody's feedback. It's been enormously helpful.
Yeah, nothing like getting comments, right, Doug? People are not afraid to tell you what they think, especially when you avail yourself to them. And
I read them, and I'm really grateful because most of them are very substantive. The very few that are just vulgar or nasty or obscene, you just sort of let those go. Right. And we don't worry too much about the death threats. Those things are always there. Somebody's always threatening me at some supermarket or somewhere else. And okay, fine. I'm not going to live my life in fear of that nonsense.
Hardly. No, listen, you're doing something right when the death threats start rolling in, because that means you're a threat. And that's what you are, Doug.
Okay.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. So grateful for your help. Always love your insight and grateful. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you, Gary.
Don't forget to tell your friends, the ones that love to listen to podcasts. Get them to add Daniel Davis Deep Dive to their podcast list. They need to know what you know. They can get it to where they already get their podcast. You just got to tell them.